There are places in Ontario where the past does not feel entirely finished. You can drive through them in daylight and see nothing unusual. A church. A few farms. A quiet road disappearing between the fields. But travel that same road after midnight, when the snow is blowing across the pavement and every farmhouse window has gone dark, and suddenly history feels much closer. Tonight, Carol and I are taking you to Lucan, Ontario, to a lonely stretch of road once known as the Roman Line, and to the story of a family whose name has survived for almost a century and a half. The Black Donnellys.
And before Marty turns them into a family of ghosts, criminals, and supernatural lumberjacks.
I had not reached the lumberjacks yet.
We should begin with what is known. James and Johanna Donnelly came from County Tipperary, Ireland, during the 1840s. Like thousands of Irish immigrants, they came to Canada hoping land would offer them a better life. They settled near Lucan in Biddulph Township, northwest of London. But the community they entered was not peaceful. Many of the settlers had brought old Irish grudges with them. Religious divisions, political loyalties, and family feuds did not disappear simply because they crossed the Atlantic. They had merely found new soil.
And the Donnellys were not exactly quiet people. They fought. They argued. They went to court. They operated a stagecoach business and became involved in a bitter rivalry with competing operators. Their horses disappeared. Barns burned. Equipment was damaged. People were assaulted. Whenever trouble occurred around Biddulph Township, somebody seemed ready to blame a Donnelly. Sometimes fairly. Sometimes perhaps because blaming the Donnellys had become a local tradition.
James Donnelly himself had been convicted of killing Patrick Farrell during a violent confrontation in 1857. His death sentence was later reduced, and he eventually returned home. That conviction followed the family for years. To their enemies, it proved the Donnellys were dangerous. To the Donnellys, it may have proved that the community would always consider them guilty, whether evidence existed or not.
By the late 1870s, the Donnellys had become more than a troublesome family. They had become a legend. People whispered that they burned barns, that they beat their rivals, that they intimidated witnesses, that no horse, wagon, or stagecoach was safe if a Donnelly wanted revenge. But legends are dangerous things, Carol. Because once a community turns a family into monsters, ordinary people can convince themselves that almost anything done to those monsters is justified.
That appears to be what happened. A local organization called the Vigilance Committee was formed, supposedly to control crime in the township. Its members met in secret. Some were respectable farmers and neighbors. Some were believed to have personal grievances against the family. And on the night of February 3, 1880, a group of men gathered at a nearby schoolhouse. Before the sun rose, 5 members of the Donnelly household would be dead.
It was bitterly cold. Snow covered the ground. Inside the Donnelly farmhouse were James and Johanna, their son Tom, their niece Bridget, and a young farmhand named Johnny O'Connor. Johnny was only 13 years old. He had been given a place to sleep inside the house. And because of where he was hidden, he became the witness the attackers never knew existed.
Sometime after midnight, men surrounded the home. They entered claiming they had a warrant. James was pulled from bed. An argument began. Then the attack started. Johnny remained hidden and silent, while the house descended into confusion. The attackers believed everyone inside had been killed. Before leaving, they set the farmhouse on fire.
Imagine being 13 years old. The room filling with smoke. The house burning around you. The voices of the men fading outside. Johnny escaped through the flames and made his way into the freezing darkness. But the mob had not finished. Several kilometers away lived another Donnelly son, John. The men traveled to his house, called out his brother William's name, and waited for someone to open the door. John answered. He became the fifth victim that night. William, the man they apparently intended to find, was not home.
By morning, the Donnelly farmhouse had been destroyed. James, Johanna, Tom, and Bridget were found among the ruins. John had been killed at the second house. Yet several members of the family survived because they happened to be elsewhere. The community knew a mob had moved through Biddulph Township. Johnny O'Connor had witnessed part of the attack. Suspects were identified. Trials followed, and still, no one was convicted.
Not one person. 5 people killed. A child witness. A community filled with rumors. And 2 juries unwilling or unable to find anyone guilty. That may be the darkest part of the story. Not simply that a mob attacked a family, but that afterward an entire countryside seemed to close its mouth.
Some residents probably feared retaliation. Others may have believed the Donnellys deserved what happened. Some may have protected relatives, neighbors, or friends. And as the years passed, fact became tangled with exaggeration. The Donnellys were portrayed as savage criminals in some accounts and innocent victims in others. The truth is more uncomfortable. Members of the family had been involved in violence and crime. But the people who came to their home that night were not a court. They were not a jury. And whatever crimes the Donnellys may have committed, a masked mob had no right to appoint itself judge and executioner.
But this is Campfire Stories, Carol. So we cannot leave Lucan without discussing the ghosts.
I knew you would get there eventually.
For generations, people around Lucan have told stories about the Roman line. Drivers have described strange lights near the old homestead. Some claim horses once refused to pass the property after dark. Others speak of voices in empty fields, footsteps where no person is walking, and the outline of a woman standing beside the road. There are stories of a midnight stagecoach racing through the darkness, even though the Donnelly coaches disappeared long ago.
And none of that can be proven.
Of course not. A proper ghost never fills out the necessary paperwork.
But there is a reason these stories survive. The murders were never legally resolved. There was no conviction, no official ending. The people responsible returned to their homes, worked their farms, and lived among their neighbors. The Donnellys entered the ground. The secret remained above it.
Maybe that is what creates a haunting. Not a white figure floating through a wall. Not chains rattling in an attic. Maybe a place becomes haunted when everyone knows what happened, but no one is willing to say it aloud.
Lucan today is not the violent settlement of 1880. It is a peaceful Ontario community, and its museum works to separate documented history from the sensational legends that grew afterward. But on a cold February night, when the moon is hidden and snow moves across the Roman line, it is easy to understand why the Donnelly story refuses to disappear.
Because some stories end when the final page is turned. Others remain open, waiting for a name, waiting for a confession, waiting for somebody to tell the truth.
And the Black Donnellys have been waiting since 1880.
Keep the fire burning. And should you ever find yourself driving outside Lucan after midnight,
Keep your eyes on the road.
especially if you hear a stagecoach coming up behind you.
Good night, Marty.
Good night, Carol. And good night to whatever may still be traveling the Roman line.